Okay, this video I'm going to explain how to add a student. I guess the first thing you need to understand is that the student will be added to the working memory, the two-dimensional array that you loaded whenever you first read in the users from backend storage. So the first thing I guess we have to do is, after the method declaration, is create the variables that we need. Now in this particular example, every student's going to have a first name, a surname, a gender, a house, a username, an age. So all those variables, are string variables, and the user will also have an age, which is an int, and it's a geography field trip for which that the geography teacher is going to record deposits that they've paid. So we're going to record 3 ints for deposits 1, 2 and 3, and a quiz score of 0. Now whenever we first add the student, this is something that the geography teacher is going to do, and all they're going to do at this stage is really just record these details here. So I have not only declared these variables, but I've initialized these ints to 0, because we're not going to take any information from the students at this stage, because it's not appropriate for us to do so. The only information we're going to record is these string variables: first name, surname, gender, house and username. Now I have declared and initialized these to just empty literals. That just means just like a blank statement. The next thing then we do is that we create an array, a string array, which will store the student, each student as we read it in. So this will store all the student details here, of which these here are sort of pre-populated, and these here we're going to read in from the user. Then we call our old faithful the app title, add student details. That's just little banner at the top of the screen, plus a little breadcrumbs to let the user know where they are, which menu they're in. Then again, we're back to our our error handling mechanism, our try catch statement. So the try block will encapsulate, will wrap around any bits of code where there is potential room for issues arising, or exceptions, or little bugs in the code. So that will capture the bugs, and then we ask the student to read in their name. And there's not really any error handling we can do in that. Their name could be anything really, so you can't really put any validation on the name. Same as surname, you just read it in. Now I have put what's known as validation round gender, and validation just means that you're controlling the accuracy of the data entered. So you're ensuring that the data entered follows a particular pattern, and in this case I want them to enter gender as either an M or an F, and you'll see that I've used little backslashes here in front of speech marks. This allows me, this is called an escape character, and that allows me to use speech marks within a string. I read in their gender, so I ask them to enter it as either M or F. I read it in, put it to lowercase, and then I put it all in a do while, which means that I can, if they don't enter gender as either M or F, so if it's not equal to M and it's not equal to F, then they haven't followed the guidance, in which case this loop will keep running. So that is a type of validation, and it's a way of you controlling and ensuring that the user enters data as you would expect. And I'll show you what this looks like in a wee second once we've ran the program fully. I've used another do while, and a do while is should first ask questions later, remember, so it'll execute the code at least once, and then it'll check if it needs to execute it again. So I'm asking them to enter age, and what I've done is I've built the read in into the condition of the while statement. So what this is saying is read in from the console the value that they've entered, and then try to parse it, try to convert it to a number. If it does convert to a number, then this will equal true. Okay, so that part of the code will equal true, and it will populate this variable age, which I've declared here. It will populate this variable age with an int, with a number. And then the next part of the code, it then says, and if that age, which has just been populated, remember, if that is populated, then that, and if that age is greater than 11, and if I could see it here, and age is less than or equal to 18. So if that is true and that is true, if both are true, then this says repeat while both are not true, or either are not true. Both have to be true. Both have to be true for this to exit onto the next loop. So in other words, if either part fails, then it's going to ask them to enter the age again. And that's what this little exclamation mark does. That says while that's not true, this, while it's not, it can't convert it to a number, and the age is not is greater than 18 or less than 11, then keep asking the age. Another data validation, this time around the house types. So what I've asked the user to enter Colin, Crew, Davis or Ockram. Again, notice the significance of this to lower statement. The reason for that is it means I only have to type in one permutation. Only have to check one permutation of Colin. I can check it all in lowercase as opposed to checking in uppercase, the first letter in uppercase, the second letter in uppercase, and so on and so forth. I can just check if one permutation of Colin is true. So what I'm saying here is while house is not equal to Colin, and it's not equal to Ockram, and it's not equal to Davis, and it's not equal to Crew, while that's true, keep asking them to enter the house type. This is all followed, this try is all followed by a catch, and the catch, remember, will catch any issues that arise out of any of the data entry, and it will then output the issue to string, and then load the add student menu again. Now we've read all the data in. Now we go to populating the array that we need to use to get into our two-dimensional array. Now you'll notice in this particular program I have a username variable, and that username is generated with another method called generate username. And what it does is it takes the first letter of the first name and the surname, and then it generates a 3-digit number, a bit like your C2K username, and it assigns it to this username variable, which is a string. Now I'm not going to show you how that method works in this particular video. I'll create another video which explains that in a bit more details. Now it's not overly complicated, it's just using methods of the string class to clip, if you like, the first letter from first name and then concatenate that letter to surname and a 3-digit number. So all I've done here is I've populated a single dimensional array with username, first name, surname, gender, and so on and so forth. So I've populated all 10 locations with firstly the data that I've read in, and then also the data that was declared and initialized and set to 0 at the start of this method. Now what I have to do is because whenever I read in the CSV file into my two-dimensional array, my student's two-dimensional array, because I'm adding a student, and remember the characteristics of an array, and an array is fixed in size, so I can't suddenly create another drawer, if you like, in the array to add this new student into. So what I have to do is create a new array and make it one bigger than the current length of the existing array. So all I do is just, it's the same notation, if you like, for creating a two-dimensional array. String, a bracket, comma, bracket indicates it's two-dimensional, and I've called it new students. Said it's a string, and instead of putting in the number of students and the number of columns, or number of bits of info, sorry, I've just said that this new student array is going to be one bigger than the current two-dimensional array, and I do that by getting the length of the current, getting the number of rows of the current array, and adding another row to it. Number of bits of info stays the same because we're not adding any additional information, we're just adding another row, if you like, not another column. Now what we have to do is, once we've created this new array will be empty, don't forget. Okay, so this is the array that has all the information. So what I have to do is I have to copy the existing rows and columns from this array into this array, because all this does is this creates an empty two-dimensional array which is one row bigger and has exactly the same number of columns. And that last row, if you think of it, is going to be blank. So all this two-dimensional loop is doing is it's iterating through each row in this two-dimensional array as determined by this dot get length bracket 0 bracket method. So that goes through each this outer loop goes through each row, and then within each row this iterates through each column in that particular row. So this is called the inner loop, and this is the j variable. So this looks at the number of columns within this existing two-dimensional array. And what it does then is it simply copies the value in the old two-dimensional array into exactly the same location in the new two-dimensional array. But don't forget, because this is using the number of rows from the existing two-dimensional array, the number of columns from the existing two-dimensional array, it will only populate, let's say if it's this new two-dimensional array is 13 rows, this obviously is 12 rows, this will only populate the first 12 off those 13 rows. So that last row will be left intact. And that is because the condition is using the number of rows and the number of columns in the existing two-dimensional array. Now the number of columns doesn't change anyway between the two different arrays, the old two-dimensional array and the new two-dimensional array, which will allows me to put in the new student. But it's there. It's a mechanism for copying the old into the new. Now I've populated, let's say for example, the first 12 off the 13 rows. I need to get to populate that last row, and that's what this last statement does. So this last statement then essentially populates this last row. And what it does is it's just a single for loop, and it's just saying in this new array, go to the last row, which is what this statement is doing. This is getting the length, the number of rows in the new two-dimensional array. And you'll see this -1, and that's because if there are 13 rows, remember the last index location is 12 because the number started at 0. So there might be 13 rows, but the actual location of the last row that needs updated is 12. So that's why we subtract 1, because that is the last index location of the last row in this new two-dimensional array. K is essentially the column, so this just iterates through the number of columns, and that doesn't change between the old and the new. It still has 10 columns, and that is equal to the value of K, the index location as specified by the counter K in this temporary student array. And remember, this temporary student array is holding the current student details that we've added through this method. Once that's done, so it's added the new student to this last row in the new two-dimensional array. It then sends that new two-dimensional array to the write to file method. It tells the user that the details have been added, and then asks them to press any key to continue. The console.read key then, once they press that, it will load the main menu, and that is that.